Hey everybody, it's Mike Frieder here with On-Call Compliance Solutions, and I'm back with another compliance tip of the week. Today we're talking about DFARS, NIST SP 800-171, and CMMC, understanding the Azure Government Cloud Control Plane and compliance. How does it all work? So hey, if you're a defense contractor who's feeling overwhelmed, tired, and alone, trying to understand all of this DFARS, NIST SP 800-171, and CMMC compliance stuff, I've got great news for you. You found your home here at On-Call Compliance Solutions, where we can help you transform into your company's on-call compliance hero. Let's jump into it. So, look, today, in this week's video, we're going to get a little bit into the weeds on Azure Government, and specifically this concept called the control plane. And you're probably thinking, like, why are we doing this? And there's actually some really good reasons why. We're gonna dive into this little piece of nitty gritty. And I'm gonna tell you all about it in this video. We'll have had a ton of questions lately. So we have had, I can't really pronounce anything, but I'm gonna try it in again anyway. So we've had a ton of questions lately discussing the concept of how you can create a compliance bubble using Azure Government virtual machines to achieve compliance in a highly cost-effective, efficient, and scalable manner. One of the biggest questions we get about Azure virtual machines, particularly Azure Government virtual machines, is, Mike, what is the control plane stuff, and how could it possibly work to create the separation needed between my insecure and non-compliant resources, like my whole network, and everything else that is compliant to CCUI and all the other kinds of sensitive information that we may have inside of our systems. So again, how exactly does that separation work? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about virtual machines, all kinds of fun stuff. First, I think it helps to have a quick catch up on the concept of Azure Government virtual machines and why we love them so much. First, imagine that you have a network with 100 computers, all right? Typical, small to mid-sized machine shop or manufacturer, producer of something. Ordinarily, you would have to put compliance solutions in place for those 100 computers. That is, licensing all 100 computers for SIEM and SOC and application whitelisting and blacklisting, etc. A lot of solutions that, let's be honest, the average company may not be putting in when it comes to cybersecurity unless they had to be compliant for this. And yes, it is true, you do not have to protect the whole network if there is no segmentation going on, as everything else on this network could potentially have access to CUI. So, gotta protect the whole network. But what if we only have like 10 users that will ever truly access and work with CUI? This too is not an unusual situation. In fact, for many defense contractors, this is actually more likely, as only a small percentage of their revenue and output involves CUI. Again, we hear it all the time. 3% of my business is defense. 5% of my business is defense. I get it. So in that case, or another way of looking at it is, I've only got 5 users who are actually going to see the quote-unquote CUI or need to work with it or something like that. So in those cases, it only makes sense to simply put it in the bubble, right? Or create virtual machines where work with CUI takes place and stays away from our existing primary environments. We put a virtual machine inside of Azure Government, completely isolated environment, and then there's our machines on our local network, totally different place. So what's the result? A huge cost savings, and with On-Call's assistance, we can help you truly master the scaling approach to cost savings. As an example, for those same 10 users, we could create a pool of resources, let's call it 2 virtual machines, and then allow those 10 users to log into those 2 virtual machines on an as-needed basis, only using the resources they need. And believe me, you could definitely have 10 users working off of 2 virtual machines. There's definitely enough resources there depending upon what they're doing. So that's right, 10 users might only require paying for 2 virtual machines. Don't you wish you could do that in your office today? I mean, like, if we could achieve efficiencies like that, we would be in great shape. Now, take it a step further, and we begin to realize that with Azure virtual machines, there is no hardware to buy, none to maintain, or to fail us. Wow, there's a lot of advantages there, and we could really deep dive into any one of those advantages, but it's a lot. And you're probably like, wow, Mike, hang on a second, wait a minute. This sounds pretty awesome. And it is, and that's the point. That's why we're such a big fan of it, because you eliminate so many issues. The entire hardware layer gone, never worry about a computer breaking again, it's fine. Yeah, it's Microsoft's problem. That's what you pay them for, right? So here comes my very favorite part of all. The DoD's Office of the CIO has stated that as long as there is no resource redirection to an unsecured resource, i.e. there's no redirection between the computer in Azure Gov and your computer back at your office or your house. This method of creating a secure enclave, or as we like to say, the bubble, is totally compliant and okay to access from even unsecured and non-compliant devices. Hang on a second, Mike. Back up one more time. You're telling me that I can just use any old computer right off the shelf at Best Buy and I can go access this virtual machine and it's totally okay? The answer is yes, and that's where we get into the control plane. It's a huge win. Now, you don't have to worry about compliance on your local machines anymore. Heck, you don't even have to worry about whether your employees are using their own bring your own device or BYOD, or bringing their own device equipment like their home computers or a laptop that they just like randomly picked up on a trip somewhere. Honestly, I have to tell you, it's probably our new favorite way of helping clients get compliant because there's so many advantages to it. Okay, so now that we have the background out of the way, what about this control plane thing are you talking about? Again, there's a lot of talking about control plane. What is that? Well, what makes compliance possible in this environment, even if you are accessing it from a non-compliant device, is something called the control plane. And as the name suggests, it is the setup of tools used to control who gets access to what and what can't go past the control plane. In other words, it's kind of like a trap door. Think of it like this. It's a line in the sand that information cannot cross. So in Azure Government, the control plane refers to the set of tools and services that manage and control the cloud resources. Here's a breakdown of its key aspects. Number one, Azure Resource Manager, right, or ARM. Azure Resource Manager is huge, and what's great is it works behind the scenes. There's some functionality. The ARM is the core component of the control plane. It allows users to deploy, manage, and control resources within Azure Government. So in other words, this is so huge, right? You essentially can group resources, and let's say that there's a virtual machine and you're only going to allow certain users to access it. Well, that's right in line with what you have to do in NIST SP 800-171, isn't it? So Azure basically has these things built in and ready to go. Resource groups. All resources are organized into resource groups, which are containers that hold related resources for an Azure solution. So this is really cool. Our virtual machines may be able to access servers within Azure. So let's say you have a SolidWorks licensing server and you're using SolidWorks. You can have that on a virtual machine, but through the control plane, you might have access limited to not be able to touch that Azure server unless your software does it. Really cool, right? That's proper restriction of access. Or more importantly, another one, and this is my favorite, is no one could possibly even know that a resource exists unless they successfully log in to Azure through the control plane. So you don't even know resources exist unless you have a successful authentication, and then it reverts back to Microsoft single sign-on, which is awesome. Now, Azure subscriptions. Management. Subscriptions act as a policy and payment boundary for resources. Users can have multiple subscriptions under a single Azure Active Directory tenant, which is really, really awesome. Next, role-based access, or RBAC, we're familiar with, role-based access control. Access management, RBAC, helps manage who has access to Azure Government resources, what they can do with those resources, and what areas they have access to. RBAC is huge in helping you meet all of your NIST controls in that environment. Governance and compliance, policies and compliance. Azure Government is designed to meet the compliance requirements of U.S. government agencies, offering physically isolated data centers and network. So again, governance and compliance is all really built in. Then we get to Azure Policy, which helps enforce organizational standards and assess compliance at scale. Really cool. If you're scaling out a bunch of computers, we can use Azure Policies to do that. And of course, there's management tools as well. The Azure Portal provides a web-based unified console that simplifies building, deploying, and managing your Azure Government services, where Azure CLI and PowerShell are command line tools that help automate and script management tasks, making network management much easier. Then there's networking, right? We can literally create full-blown virtual networks and subnetworks within our Azure Government environment. It's so cool, just like in your regular network at home or in your office. It facilitates the creation of dedicated private networks with Azure Government. Network security groups and firewalls control access to resources. 7. Monitoring and security. Azure Security Center offers unified security management and advanced threat protection across hybrid cloud workloads. Azure Monitor collects, analyzes, and acts on telemetry data from your Azure and on-premise environments to maximize performance and availability. Kind of sounds a bit like a SIEM, doesn't it? I won't get into that. Azure Monitor versus Sentinel, that's a whole nother video for another day. Data protection and recovery. Azure Backup provides simple and secure backup services. Azure Site Recovery ensures business continuity by keeping business apps and workloads running during outages. It's a really crazy feature and it's pretty awesome. Azure Government services are physically and logically network isolated. So, With all these amazing tools at our disposal, and believe me, there's a lot. That's why setup of an Azure Government environment is a little bit complex. It's pretty easy to see why we can easily stop the flow of CUI in Azure Government. Just as a small example, you can even have a policy which blocks the ability for a screen sharing program like Teams or Zoom to be able to see the screen in an Azure Government virtual desktop. You just can't do that very easily on a normal computer, but you can do it here and do it through the control plane. Now, I totally get it. For sure, this is a technically complex topic, but here's the great news. We have all the resources you need to create your own Azure Government virtual machine environment. We can stand it up, we can run it for you, or we can run it with you. We can provide all the compliance solutions you need to go in it, and we can handle all of the compliance required activities as well and keep you compliant. Essentially, we can take care of all or any part of this that you would like, which is one of the amazing things about working with OnCall, right? It's all about flexibility. If you'd like to learn more, well, hey, you know the routine, here it comes. Because hey, at OnCall, we take defense contractors just like you who have had this DFARS, NIST, CMMC, ITAR, and EAR information security compliance stuff dropped in their laps like a seagull on a sunny day. And we teach you how to level up and be a proper OnCall compliance hero for your company, eliminating gaps, gray areas, and getting this solved, all while showing you how to leverage compliance as your secret weapon to land more defense work with higher profit margins. Now that's what becoming an OnCall compliance hero can do for you. Looking for more help getting compliant? Our compliance experts are always on call for you. Visit cmmccompliancesecrets.com or check out the description below for links to get help right now. If you love the content we're putting out here for you, help us out with a big thumbs up on that like button, or even better, smash the subscribe button to get the latest compliance content as soon as our compliance nerds roll it out. Until next compliance tip, my friends, stay safe and secure out there, and hit us in the comments below to let us know what you'd like to know more about when it comes to information security and compliance. I'll see you on the other side of that control plane.